Hey, we're live. Nice. Although I should probably start on this one. Neat. Hi, everyone. I'm Airier, and today we're checking out Star Wars Warhammer 40k, Episode 41, Mortal Precipice Part 2. Now, unlike a few other videos, I can't stay late on this one, so there's only going to be this single part, because after this video, I'm immediately taking my wife out for lunch and or dinner, depending on how long this video goes, because it's her birthday. And I might have owed her for taking a 9-hour stream yesterday that I didn't realize would be 9 hours. So I might or might not be in the doghouse right now, and I should not push my luck today. Yeah. More importantly, I'm actually really looking forward to this one. And people told me a lot of things about this video that are going to be very interesting. Like, I should name this, oh god damn it, why are we doing this guy? Why is he here? Why is he still alive? Why is this happening? Faith and Fury, and being told to bring a pencil and paper. I don't have any of those in the house because I refuse to take notes on anything, so that won't happen. More importantly, we're going to jump right in and see just how crazy this gets. If it's anything like the last episode, though, the answer is going to be really freaking crazy. I'm looking forward to this. You guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit up and let's get started. Hey, I love I can just switch over like this right now. That's so freaking cool. Neat. I should probably also make it full screen. That would help. Oh. Oh, that is different. Usually Fan has a very hype song in the beginning. This one is depressing. Like a different mood than I've ever seen him do. Okay. Oh, I can't skip ahead. I try and keep some of the audio out from music because sometimes that gets claimed.
Sister Miria watched on, a rare hollowness filling her heart as she bore witness. The other members of the hospital are moved in a frenzy around the medical bed,
that would explain.
attempting to do whatever they could with what meager power they had left. But Miria was 150 years old, and she had seen this before.
Just Fan dropping that little reminder that people in 40k can live a long time if they're in an organization that values them being alive for a long time. So not the majority of it. And in the comments it says it's getting darker. And Fan's here. Sup, man?
But never on one she looked upon with such veneration and respect.
Wait, who's dying now?
Ishtara Ordain lay in the center of all the activity.
Because she was really
eyes
fucked up
closed,
in the crash.
her chest rising and falling,
and
small,
somehow alive.
shuddering contractions which grew shallower and shallower with each breath.
I might have spoke too soon.
Her wrinkled face was ashen, her arms and legs bandaged, her chest armored in a thick cast.
Should I have the captions on? Yeah, sure.
But Miria knew it would not be enough, not nearly enough.
So she's
their
definitely
venerable
dying.
leader, their highest canoness, was dying. Her bones were broken, discoloring wounds spotting her paper-thin skin all over where it was visible, with only her face remaining unmarked by any strike, save for that dealt by time. Even if Miria could salve her mistress's internal bleeding, even if she could mend her broken bones directly and with a snap of her fingers, she knew it would not save her, not now. Ishtara was ancient by the standards of baseline humanity, and long past the time she should have taken to the field of battle. In her final fight, she had given everything.
She literally survived taking a spaceship to the face. This is well beyond everything. I'm not just breaking this right now because the mood is getting to me and I'm kind of wondering what the hell Fan has planned. It's kind of scaring me, but also because I usually don't always react the same way that it might be implied. For example, in the last part, there was a big thing where Farnus broke down and told them exactly how they thought in this big screaming event. And I'm just sitting here going like, I'm not taking this seriously because I don't hear him talk about his pain. I hear a broken, scared man clinging to the one thing he can while he's panicking and trying not to panic. And knowing that that is probably the first step of Ahsoka getting to him. And admittedly, I still think that's going to happen. Here, though, this is a character's outro, essentially. Or at least I would assume so, unless Fan pulls some utter bullshit with a character that I don't think he's really set up, so I don't really believe he would try.
And now her withered flesh simply had nothing left to give. Every breath she took, every shuddering struggle to live she exerted, was now fueled solely by her stubborn will and no will was endless. No will, save that of the Emperor.
And even that
the
is
thought
debatable.
had the senior hospitaller turning her head away, her eyes meeting the closed, golden eyelids of the master of mankind. The mask of the Emperor lay near its bearer's bed, placed upon a cushion on a table only 3 feet away. Serene and at peace, it struck her just how similar their two expressions were to each other now.
They're
both
essentially
faces,
death masks.
both mask bearer and mask, now seeming to become one, just before the moment of her death. The sister turned her face in the other direction, and there, not far away, saw the bloodied and barely living body of the Canoness's heir, her own daughter.
Oh, she was...
Sister Legatine Reyna Ordain.
Oh.
She lay nearly upon her own deathbed, taking her own shallow breaths, still covered in blood, both hers and that of the 300 clones she had murdered by her own hand.
God damn! Because unless I'm mistaken, she was not in power armor. She was just in a flight suit. So...
Slain by the fury of her weapons of fire and steel. She, at least, would live, for Reyna had much fight in her left. Her sister was...
And I just remember that she's the one that everyone was shipping. And I do mean everyone. I think Fan might even do it himself. With the I was going to say commissar. With Major Lazarus. Although he wouldn't be a major anymore. St. Lazarus. What would they call that ship? I don't know.
Even then, out upon the battlefield, stalling the Republic's advance, keeping hope alive as heroes and saints fell and died all around them.
And he came back, and he died, and he came back.
More and more, it seemed like that hope was guttering, dying like a flame in a vicious gale. The walls were falling. Already fighting had broken into the courtyard. Already they could hear it approaching the triage tents.
Oh, yeah. And because the people approaching them would be most likely gene stealers, that's not a good thing, because anyone who survives here is probably infected. Oh. If we're lucky, it's just murderous clones who are possessed by demons, and when that is technically counting as lucky, oh god. Yeah, but I also know they're not here at the moment. Also, Fan mentioned she was in power. It was Seraph in power armor. Yeah, that's on me. I completely forgot the power armor is the generic armor they use. For some reason, I just keep thinking of that as not power armor, and then the big war suits as power armor. I don't know where that implication in my head came from. Yeah, so she was in power armor, but not a war suit. That's probably what I meant, but didn't speak because words do not me, apparently.
She longed to move them into the Basilica's infirmary, but it was already packed to capacity long before the Legatine herself had been returned to them on black treads. They would have to do their best here, and it seemed even their best would not be enough. She saw some sisters preparing an invasive procedure moments from sawing into the cast over the Canoness's chest. A fresh, beating heart held within a head-sized vat container,
where'd they get that heart?
which was brought forward by a medical servitor. Miria shook her head and reached out, tightly taking the shoulder of the sister carrying the saw forward and shaking her head. "Sister Superior," the woman said as she was stopped, but Miria walked past her, taking the golden aquila pendant that hung around her own neck and reverently removing it as she came closer. Without words, she came to Ishtara's bedside, the other sisters slowly noticing her approach, a dread following her every step as more and more eyes turned to watch Miria. No, Miria, you cannot," said Sister Yennefer, standing in the way between the approaching senior sister and the faltering form of their canoness. "Stand aside, sister," Miria said, her words heavy with the sorrow of her own duty. "It is not yet time. We can still..." The younger sister began to say, "We can still waste more time and more resources, but we cannot save her. And doing anything else in vain would be the height of neglect for our duty. Attempting that kind of heart replacement surgery would only kill her faster. So, Stand aside, sister.
The fact that they would even consider a heart replacement means that either they're insane, which is always possible in 40K, or that they have some way to stabilize someone when they have all the internal bleeding. Which, admittedly, if they stole a bunch of Bacta, they might actually be able to do. But I don't think they've gone that far yet. And especially the religious side, I don't think they would really go into stealing the heretic Xenos medicine. Granted, if this was more tech priest side, I could see them easily doing it, depending on who it is.
Said Miria, eyes soft, but voice firm. I cannot! Sister Yennefer cried, tears spilling from her eyes. I swore to protect her life! She went on. We all swore it, but her life is not ours to keep. The Emperor is calling our Canoness home. She is a bride of the throne. We cannot keep her from his side. Memento mori, sister.
And Fan just drops in a little bit of freaking Latin. I only know what this means because of Unis Honest. Remember death.
This was inevitable, Miria explained, and in response, the younger Hospitlar fell to her knees, losing her strength as she began to weep. Other sisters helped her out of the way, and the senior among them continued to the bedside of her beloved leader. Yea, though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no evil, for the Emperor is with us. She intoned as she lowered the symbol, gently cupping Ishtara's head and lifting it from her pillow. The Emperor is with us, repeated the others around her as she laced the thin golden chain over the dying woman's head, gently placing her back down and laying the golden aquila across her bandaged chest.
Giving her a symbol of the Emperor as he dies. Or she dies.
Said Miria bitterly. Where is her sword?
There,
to those words, the sisters who knew looked away, shame
Some of it's
written
in the
upon
ship.
their faces. We were unable to recover it. The Tabahai remains on the field.
Ooh. Taken by her hands, the Gene Stealers. Ooh. They will be unable to touch it. Fan, did you literally just set up a sword in the stone moment where someone is going to make a massive, awesome comeback of a terrible moment where they draw the sword and use it? Because frankly, when you have a name sword that you make a point to say cannot be touched by the enemy, that is literally setting up an amazing moment I'm really hoping does happen and not just a random plot hook that just gets dropped. Fan doesn't usually do that, so I'm not too worried, but also that is such a good setup and a hook.
Taken from her hand by the Gene Stealers. They will be unable to touch it, but we are unable to recover it, said Sister Uriel, eyes downcast. No matter, said Sister Miria tightly. Find her flamer then. Bring it here. I shall not see her pass into the Emperor's embrace unarmed, she ordered. Two of the sisters nodded and departed to seek her unused armaments, soon returning with the Canoness's hand flamer, handing it to Sister Miria, who, in turn, took the bandaged and cast-heavy hands of the Canoness and placed them over the weapon, resting both on her stomach below her chest. Ishtara still breathed, her breaths quickening for a moment, feeling the familiar sensation of her instrument of death.
I like what he's doing right here, because normally what you have is the weapon and it's more just like gripping it. And you see that in soldier videos or more historical fantasies where the guy who's about to die grabs their sword and they're shaking and they just grip onto it with the last of their strength. And we're seeing it here, but played out in a religious order with a quiet respite theme in the background. And it's so different from the usual way this is played out. Now, that could also just be my confirmation bias in the media I've consumed, but it does make for a very interesting image here. One, because there's still that bit of life in her that she's not dead yet, but also showing that she's not entirely there. It's more like a fading glimpse of a person, and it's probably why we're not in her perspective anymore, because there's probably not much perspective left.
Her lips seeming to almost quirk in response, though it could have been Miria's imagination. Miria kneeled, followed by the others around her, and in that moment, the sisters began to sing, voicing a wonderful and horrible dirge, their voices seeking to wail, constrained only by their faith and discipline. It was a short ode, for they had duties to attend, but they sang it with all their hearts and all their souls. When that moment had finished, it was filled with brief silence before Miria stood once more.
I just want to say something about how singing with all their souls is a nice way just to hype up the thought process here, but that, I don't know if fan would play it this way, but that could be important. Let's see, this came out a year ago, and 40K had already started its heavy emphasis about the sisters being essentially able to tap into non-psych or psychic powers, essentially, as an actual explicit implication. Well before this. Now, I'm not sure when he wrote it prior to it coming out, so that might be something. But having them say, in a world uncorrupted by, or not even world, an entire universe uncorrupted by chaos to the same extent as their own, because we've seen there is still chaos here, it's just different and not nearly as immediately in your face. Saying something with all their souls might be a line to lead into something happening. I don't think Fan would go this way personally, but if he ever wanted to use it, this is something that he could establish here because he has shown the rules work slightly differently. For example, certain other saints who may or may not have decided to catch all the bridges.
All right, everyone rise. We cannot let sorrow forestall duty, she said, and at the command, the other sisters scattered, redoubling their efforts to save those they could, while none remained to tend to their dying leader. But Miria had barely performed 2 blood transfusions before something else filled her attention. A desperate scream, and then, not one but many, voiced by the throats of sisters and soldiers alike. A shadow fell over the tents.
They broke through.
Over the entire compound, and the wailing of terror and panic only grew more intense. The healing sisters around them paused, fear filling their eyes, pouring like poison onto those recently opened wounds they felt in their hearts. Miria could not allow it. Faith, sisters. We must keep the faith.
Because these would be the healers who aren't immediately on the battlefield. They're just battlefield adjacent. Sorry, the idea that a sister hearing battle would feel fear is like, whoa, what's going on? But then just that little reminder that these are not the front lines. The one who probably has been on the front line is probably the one we're in the perspective of, so they are better able to handle it. But it's kind of cool to show that everyone on the Imperium side is not immediately gung-ho for the murder. It's just interesting to see that variation, because in a lot of 40K media, you're either gung-ho for it, or you're a red shirt who's about to die, and there's very little variation. I've heard that actually does happen in some of the 40K crime novels, and I've heard they are amazing. Never read them. I need to. Completely forget every time I think about it. Yeah, that's a problem I need to get around.
Sister Emera, Sister Gloria, with me, she said, indicating to 2 of the battle sisters who had been left to guard the mending of the Hospitlars. They marched beside her, ceramite boots loud upon the ground as they strode to either side of the senior healer, all of them making their way to the frontmost tent flap and casting it open, stepping into the world of panic and death that awaited them beyond. The gates were breached. Rebels and heretical Xenos monsters were pouring into the courtyard, held at bay by a patchy defense composed of those guardsmen who had been waiting to hold the line. But the numbers of the rebels were bolstered by the white shells of the replique slaves of the
Oh, so this isn't just the Genestealer advance. It's the remains of the Genestealer advance bolstered by the additional forces being brought in by the surrounding units. Okay. I wasn't sure how progressed the fight was, but they're at the reinforcement phase then.
Republic.
So it's not
and the
just
protection
the initial
provided
rush.
by the Astera Militarum was a near thing indeed. Soldiers fired from both the defensive lines and from the tops of the walls, down into their own perimeters, fighting and dying to maintain the borders between the Basilica and triage tents just outside it and the now compromised walls. But These were not the factors that were sowing panic among the men and women of the Imperium.
Psyker?
These were not the enemies casting them in damned, cold shadow. Miria and her bodyguards looked up, eyes widening like saucers as they beheld what hung above them.
They lost air
Massive
superiority.
Emperor, breathed one of the battle sisters, the sky having been devoured by the hulls of 3 enormous arrowhead-shaped ships.
Because they had pulled back from the space battle was conceded, so they've lost that ground and they have to bunker in for a long haul, which admittedly 40k architecture is designed for, but this world is not nearly as built up as a hive city, so it's not nearly as doable.
The Republic Navy had arrived. They had not been stopped or staunched, and now the steel bodies of their heretical machines filled the air like portents of Armageddon itself. Their docking bays opened, yawning wide to expel swarms of attack craft and troop carriers, which buzzed and warbled in the air, akin to a plague of locusts, and falling upon them just as ravenously. They strafed the lines of Imperial defenders, rays of green death and bolts of blue, merciless fire falling from them and destroying the faithful in droves. Go! Sister Miria ordered the 2 beside her. Find Saint Lazarus. Ensure that he... She began to yell, but her voice was buffeted and blown away from the ears of the others as the massive cannons on the Republic vessels above them came to hideous life.
Oh, because you'd be able to hear it. It's in the air,
weapons fired into the tops of the wall, an inescapable burning cascade which tore the battlements apart.
Oh.
Killing everyone and...
Wait, it tore the battlements apart? This is the structure they dropped from orbit. I was under the impression that this was a adamantium built ship, or not ship, structure as a forward post that is just fuck you levels of durable. Or maybe I'm underestimating how strong the turbo laser batteries on the spaceships are. That's entirely possible as well. Huh.
Everything that had been atop them and burning them down to half their previous towering lengths. Miria's wide eyes absorbed it all, watching their defense.
I just realized what this means. A certain, definitely not Chaos Sorcerer Inquisitor, had the plan that we need to make martyrs, and he needed to help the Star Wars side to get to that point, where the Star Wars side is managing to do it on its own merit. His plan is working despite him, or in spite of him. I want to see that moment Wyler realizes, oh, they didn't need my help. Because right now he is technically working on the Star Wars side in his own fucked up way. And by side, I mean to make martyrs to unify the entire force is what his stated aim is. His actual aim is whatever Chaos decides to puppet him into doing because it's fun. But we're not going to get into that. I have my beliefs about him, and Fan has never said I intentionally was wrong. And if he has, I completely ignored that. And Fan said, Turbolasers at close range are crazy strong, but the walls are mostly made out of, flashcast ferrocrete? Oh. Okay, yeah, they're much less durable than I thought. And also Turbolasers are really insane.
It's collapsing in real time. And then, as she gawked, the enemy arrived before them. The 2 battle sisters at her side snapped their bolters up, large weapons barking and firing at an enemy Miria had not spotted until it was too late. When she did snap her eyes down before herself to see what approached, all she could understand were the 2 glowing bars of light which came for her.
2 glowing bars. This would probably be... The initial assumption would be Ahsoka, but she doesn't sound like someone who'd be leading the charge right now. So it's probably the Gene Stealer who stole the weapons.
To either side of her and lopping off the interfacing arms of both of her erstwhile guardians. In her face was the grinning,
Gene Stealer Primus.
Vicious visage of a Gene Stealer Primus. She tried to scream. The other 2 sisters beside her
if they're lucky, they only die.
As they fell away to either side, clutching at the stumps of their newly severed arms, unable to hold their bolters without them. But before Miria's voice could find purchase in her throat, the beast backhanded her with an alien claw. drawing deep furrows across her abdomen and chest, as well as throwing the Sister Hospitaller back into the triage tents. She hit the ground hard, a fellow healer kneeling to her side.
She's probably about to pull off a moment of badass
spraying something down over her bleeding chest.
What?
Fellow healer kneeling to her side.
Fellow healer. Okay, I missed the fellow healer part. I thought one of the gene stealers was spraying things, in which case that would be bad.
Spraying something down over her bleeding chest. A bluish-black foam which staunched the bleeding and began to address the gene stealer's corrosive poison before it could kill too much of her.
Not surprised.
Miria was dizzy, her eyes unfocused as pain and death began to fill her body. She did not see the alien follow her inside, but after a moment, it was clear that it had, ripping and tearing its way through the terrified medics and wounded soldiers of the Imperium, whipping its stolen weapons through them without resistance. As the few who could attempt it fought back in desperation. It was not long before it was standing over her once more, the sister tending to her, never leaving her side.
Okay, one, that sister is ballsy as fuck. Two, lightsabers in the hands of enemies that can tank most damage to it is somehow more terrifying. Yeah. This is just my personal thought right now. Fan is just showing that in the hands of someone who's durable, lightsabers are scary as fuck, man. Granted, power swords in general are scary as fuck whenever you have an enemy that's durable enough to use them and not die. But it does show that it's not just a lightsaber thing. Anyone can be scary with them, which is also part of the reason that Darth Vader was so terrifying, because he seemed that durable and had lightsabers.
Even as she feebly tried to pull the fellow healer back, everything beyond the beast was a dead, gore-ridden slick of those who should have been saved and those who should have been saving. Behind them, the remaining Sisters of the Hospitaller Order began to move patients, running to fill the hallways and spare rooms of the Basilica, evacuating anyone they could move.
Further?
The thing smiled a leering, hateful smile, watching them run before him. Miria scratched at her waist, pulling free a bolt pistol and aiming it up with a trembling hand at the monster. She fired, and it jerked its head to the side, trivially avoiding the shot. The sister beside her tried to do the same, but the transhuman terror that had filled her at the sight of its butchery...
Wait, what? I mean, yeah, that technically would count as transhuman, but I didn't realize that applied to everyone outside of Space Marines. I thought that was a specific phrase reserved for Space Marines. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. I mean, when used more broadly, anything that is human adjacent and massive is probably good enough to trigger it. I just didn't realize it was ever something that was used that way in 40k anywhere.
Made her aim even less reliable than Miria's, and the creature contemptuously kicked the weapon from her hand.
Do not fight.
That's not good.
It said to them in clear Gothic, spoken through a monster's voice.
Oh no.
Instead, pray to your dead god.
I mean, admittedly, praying to their dead god is fighting, so sure. I mean, if we're lucky, he only kills them, because there's always worse options. Also, Hobbit, thank you very much. And Alpha Boost is putting on a Mage the Ascension live play that has full HTP level quality Norfolk Wizard game. Will I be reacting to it? Hobbit? Yes, I will. I mean to. And I think I'll probably do the same thing I'm doing now with fans work. I'll just do it to the live play. That said, I really want to do more of fans work because it's just so freaking good. Also, if he ever did anything like this with his other works, he did a lot of comics, but I don't think showing the comic would be a good option because that gives away way too much.
For you will be joining him soon.
It mocked, raising its sabers high over its head.
Now does Fan go a cut off here? Or does Regina wake up?
And yet, those two blades were suddenly caught. The searing weapons of the Jedi brutally halted against the proud, blue-shaded steel of a sparking power sword.
Wait for it.
Miria looked up from her daze and saw, standing over them, face fixed in a grimace just as hateful as any grin the creature could make, was Reyna Ordain. Face and body still streaked in blood, her power armor half disassembled around her, all but useless. She forced...
Oh, wait. So she's not fighting in power armor. She's fighting despite power armor. Because if it's useless on her, that means it's probably actually slowing her down. That's not good.
The thing back with a pained roar, blood spilling from torn stitches as a myriad of blaster burns stung and seared her flexing muscles. Hear me, O God Emperor of mankind!
Speaking of the dead god.
She shouted as she stepped over the two hospital, still contending with the now aware counter-strikes of the alien she faced. Deliver me from my enemies! Protect us from those who rise up against you! Reyna roared, sweeping, hacking, blade clashing against the lightsabers held by the enemy. Tables and beds were overturned, bodies and broken tools trampled as she drove the thing back with her fury alone. Her bloodied face was feral, her eyes a brilliant gold that was all but natural.
And she picked up what her mom had.
Heresy and save us from the beasts of the void! Behold how they lie in wait for us, fierce monsters who conspire against you and your flock! For no offense or sin above being human! Oh God, Emperor, witness me and call down your wrath through my arms! She cried out, the momentum of her swings growing greater and greater, her strikes and counterstrikes gaining in speed as well as force. Her strikes and counterstrikes gaining in speed as well as force.
He wouldn't. Fan wouldn't, would he? That is a very specific word to use. Especially considering you've established that Fan has established the Force is the warp. But the sisters are pulling from the God Emperor's power, which is warp related. But also GW has highlighted that they're not always warp related. So sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't, except for when they are, but they're sometimes not. Because they're very inconsistent about that inconsistently, but also consistently inconsistent, which is his own form of what the fuck is going on. I don't even know at this point. Fan could easily be just dropping the word force in. No problem there. It fits. Force, power implied is exactly what it means. Fine. But you're talking about someone wielding Jedi weapons and you're gaining in the Force to fight back against them. That is... I want to say it's unrelated. It probably is unrelated. Almost entirely unrelated. But... we are seeing someone going full Golden Eye Saint mode. I mean, she just needs a few wings to go full on. And he's using a very specific term. If this was against Weiler, if this was against the clones, I wouldn't bring this up. And the context would not be there. But it's specifically because within this couple paragraphs, we're talking about a monster wielding Jedi weapons. So it's bringing up the association. It's probably nothing, but this could also be Fan hinting at him about to have fun with us by showing a little bit more mixing of terminology and maybe mixing of power sources or understanding of them. I don't know. And that's just... yeah.
But the beast she contended with was no slouch. And as the surprise of her intervention wore away, its waning strength waxed stronger still, returning her fury and faith with inhuman frenzy and rapacious battle lust. Blow for blow,
Monster is a
strike
monster.
by strike, they pushed each other up and down the ruined half of the medical tents, teeth born in a mutual thirst for the death of the other. And then, as suddenly as it had began, the battle ended.
What?
A blade locked on a saber, twisting to catch its twin, and barely missing by a hair's breadth. Reyna gasped.
I would have
fresh
sworn she
blood
just survived this
spraying
one.
from her lips, the blue blade of light which had slipped past her guard now burning through her, piercing into her abdomen and out her back, bright as the face of an azure sun. Miria felt her blood freeze, having lifted herself to her feet, leaning against the supporting tent pole, watching as Reyna Ordain, bloody daughter and heir to their order began to lose her strength.
If only there was some random thing they could do involving not magic that would bring people back to life.
As well as her life. The creature
Would've sworn she
smiled
survived this one.
wide and cruel, leering closer to
not
her
expecting
aghast
that.
expression.
Woe to the defeated.
Really expected him to
It
die here.
proclaimed, causing her to grit her red
Unless Van has
teeth
something
one
planned.
more time. She released her sword, raising her fist and bringing it down like a thunderhammer, smashing the hilt of the blade which pierced her, and deactivating the saber as its pieces scattered across the
Oh,
ground.
that worked?
The Primus growled at
I have
her
no idea how
defiance
destroying a lightsaber
and
works.
kicked her with its inhuman strength, sending her sailing back.
But she also avoided the real big problem of a lightsaber wound. Pulling it out at an angle and cutting further. Because there's plenty of people who survive being stabbed with lightsabers unless they're, plotted out to die.
And crashing into a row of intact medical beds. Reyna groaned and struggled to rise, but the damage had been done, and she could do no more than quake and cough blood. The creature tossing aside what was left of its ruined saber and raising its functional one high.
Die.
It said as it came upon her,
have a feeling someone's
its
about to
shadow
throw themselves in the
encompassing
way.
her as it blocked the light of the entrance.
Die like your dead god.
It
Technically,
growled, ruthlessly
that's-
burying its powerful teeth in a
1 second. Okay, maybe right before starting the stream, I shouldn't have gone, Kitty! Oh, you're so cute, you're adorable. And then rub my face into their back because they're adorable and soft and cute and cuddly this morning. It's not like I'm allergic to cats or anything. Honestly, the fact that my eyes aren't completely bloodshot is more that my eyes are really well medicated at the moment than anything else. Yeah.
grin which signaled the end. The Emperor is not
What?
dead, said another voice.
How the hell
A
is she
new voice,
awake?
An old voice. Miria turned just as the Xenos did, both of their eyes finding the frail,
Saint
withered shape
indeed.
of Ishtara Ordain, bandages trailing off her like white tassels. The cast around her right hand shattered, her hand flamer held tightly in a steady, deadlocked grip. He is right here, she said, pulling the trigger and
Dodge
issuing
this, you
forth a
freaking
torrent
casual.
of brilliant, swirling flames.
And the fact that they didn't have her sword but her flamer turns out to be the thing they needed.
The beastly
Grandma
butcher howled
wins.
as its body was captured in fire, saving itself by crouching to the ground, forcing Ishtara to cease the torrent, lest it pass her target and roast her own dying daughter.
Yeah.
As Ishtara ceased her fire and aimed her weapon up, the beast scrambled across the ground like a titanic roach, moving far faster than it had on two legs, screeching pain as it ran across the floor. Ishtara tried to blast it twice more, but its speed outdid her, and it escaped, still aflame, out to the front of the entrance flaps of the triage tents. Ishtara stared after it, not breaking her glare, even when Miria came before her and kneeled. "My holy lady," Miria gasped in total disbelief. "Rise, Miria."
Just gonna throw it out there. Emperor Juice really does do a body well. But also, yeah, I have a feeling I know what's about to happen.
"Tend to my daughter," said Ishtara, her eyes shimmering like golden discs. But my lady, you," the senior
Probably used up the
hospitaller
last
began
of
to
their
say.
body.
"I am dying," said the ancient warrior mistress of their order.
Note to be said at her age, not dying would be the weird part.
"But my
And her
duty is
wounds.
not yet done. The Emperor demands one last service. from
Another?
me
What else do you
before
even
I
have in
go
you?
To his side," she said as she began to stride forward on stick-thin limbs.
This is literally power
And just
keeping her
like
up.
that, She disappeared through the entrance, out into the courtyard.
God
And Mary
damn.
could not but whisper her awe before running to reach Reyna herself, all the while muttering holy words. And they called upon the name of their daemon, and she called upon the name of the emperor, and the god who answered spoke by fire, and all knew that he was the master of all.
Well, now, so we're probably going to see Ishtara from the outside perspective, not just, or outside to the Imperium perspective. She's about to witness that. And, ooh, I'm assuming Fan is giving Ishtara a send-off against someone who's being built up as a massive problem. God damn. Innocence is not enough indeed.
Givona was shocked, truly.
Oh,
she had
so
known
made a 3D
Combier's
model.
armor was strong. It had to be from all she had seen. But as she treated and dressed the wounds on his back, bolter wounds, she came to fully realize just how much of that lethal damage had been absorbed before penetrating into his skin. She used her power, reaching in and finding another metal fragment, pulling it out and making Combier wince. The other thing that shocked her was just how quickly that Bacta solution was working. In fact, it was working too fast, making more painful the work she had to perform as skin and sinew tried to rapidly regrow over places where shrapnel from the shots and his shattered armor were.
A gene stealer finding out that they have a magical substance that can make growth happen immediately. The gene stealers are inherently a mutation. I'm hoping Fan doesn't go the way I'm assuming that could easily be done at this point and say, hey, you want to see a magic trick, kids? Give this gene stealer some back to see what happens when unstable growth and immediate engagement happens with two different types of biology, that one might be mutating and controlling the other. I don't think he's going to go this way, but if he wanted to have some body horror here, this is an easy way he could. I really hope he doesn't, because I've already seen him describe things that are horrific, and I'm okay with not doing that again. A certain flesh cloak enthusiast was more than enough, thank you very much.
Buried. Despite that, she was thankful for it as well. Thankful that
Fan, why are you in the chat laughing? No, Fan, no. Oh God, I should have shut up. I'm just going to shut up. We're saying nothing else.
he would be able to heal so quickly, having half the rebreather still left, clutched in his hand, waiting for her to get done before using any of the rest. Ouch! Frag! Givona, are you sure you can't do that a little more gently?
Not with her skill level.
Combier whined, sweating in pain as she reached in with a keen knife she had taken off an Imperial soldier's body, helping to cut a way out for another sharp fragment. She gently batted his head with her free hand as the piece of metal came out, floating in the air before she let it drop into a bloody stack of similar shards. This is only happening because you wouldn't stay back. You wanted battle? Well, this is part of it. Hold still, or it will hurt even worse. She lightly scolded him, shaking her head. Can't you just let the Bacta push it out? The Axumite whined.
It would do that? Oh, damn. Seriously. How is it that in a world where there is literal space magic, the craziest power available is literally the miracle healing juice? Usually that's like video game levels of it just works. But it's actually how it's being portrayed here. And frankly, I can't say that's not how it's portrayed in canon as well, because it seems to do the immediate. You only die if you don't have miracle Bacta juice on you. Or you have a plot relevant reason, like someone hits you with a fork and you die, because that's apparently ways Jedi die now.
Cringing again as she found another piece and began moving it out. Samael laughed, shaking his head and sauntering over.
He hasn't killed her.
Givona narrowed her eyes at the odd.
I was assuming he would have left. Oh, this changes a lot of my impression of this.
Large man. He wore a black long coat over what looked like green workers' clothes that barely fit him, almost splitting at the seams over every one of his many muscles. He wore a bright ruby ring on his right hand, the thing in the shape of a red skull framed in bright golden wings.
I know it's not going to be a thing, but just with the constant depictions of how massive his muscles are and how big of a person he is, I'm kind of hoping he turns out to be Alpha Legion. Either just someone who's had some of the scout training and became the equivalent in the Alpha Legion, or they're just a regular human doing it. Because, frankly, I just find it funny. Is Fan going to do that? No, I think that would be way too down the line he hasn't touched on. He's really been avoiding mostly the more chaotic side, except for very specific units. Kaon. So it's not impossible. It doesn't seem like the way he's going to go with this. Plus, this is the character we're being built up as more human, if not excellent human side, as opposed to transhuman.
A ring she was sure he had not been wearing when he first arrived. His smell, his stance, the way his mind echoed so oddly, it all made what
His
little
mind
hair she
echoed?
had stand on end.
Wait, she has hair? Oh, probably body hair.
What
Not
was
head
it
hair.
about that man that set her off so much? His sweat tainted the air with a chemical
Reminds
scent
you of a
she
place
had
you're about to be dead with?
familiarity with, though only vaguely. And the way he moved, it was just...
And Fan is laughing even harder. Why is Fan laughing even? I'm not going to ask. He might answer, and that's always getting weirder.
uncanny, wrong. And yet, she had seen loads of new creatures here in this place. And he had already helped them, brought even more reinforcements, even before the Republic had decided to join the fight. And all of that aside, it was he who had supplied the healing agent to Combir. So...
Which means he has a source himself. And frankly, if they could get back to the Imperium, that is unironically more than worthwhile any single loss they could have in the Star Wars side. If there's not at least one Inquisitor going, okay, we need to figure out how to use this and get it to the Emperor, because can you imagine what their usual attrition rates would look like if they had Bacta? This isn't a small thing. This would be, oh my God, levels of the flesh ain't weak. The flesh gets better faster than you can repair machinery levels. And admittedly, it would probably cause some kind of schism with the Mechanicus because the flesh is weak is usually what they go with. And I'm sure, even though it should be carried out that the flesh is weak because it loses memory and mind is what matters, humanity is what matters, and it shouldn't just be that we need to make the metal better, I would be expecting that to happen. I don't think Fan would ever go with any of what I just said because that is well beyond the scope of this story, and they don't even know if they can get back right now, but it would be amazing. And oh yeah, Lebe said that the biologists would love this. Yes, they would. The ones who don't always follow canon, or the ones who are more radical and think the flesh is actually weak and should be destroyed, would hate it. But it would be a massive improvement to more or less anything it touches. I'm sure it would be used in horrible ways. And giving the Emperor a Bacta bath, I could see them purifying the Bacta and reducing it to uselessness and thinking it doesn't help because he's too holy. Because that is internally terrifyingly hilarious to me. While everyone else around it is less holy. So it completely works on them.
why was she so on edge near him?
I don't
Survival
think it works like that, kid. Sure, this juice might push out a few splinters, but what you got in your back is a bit more than that.
He said as he squatted down next to them, pulling out a half-empty carton of cigarettes and using both hands to shake the remaining sticks out. He gathered them up in an enormous...
And we're hearing this from Javona's part, and she's recognizing the cigarette is a cigarette. I mean, honestly, this is one of those weird things where if we didn't already know explicitly who she was, this would be a good tell. Because Fan has actually been very consistent about this. Every time we see this guy, if we're seeing this from a perspective on the 40K side, sure, they can see cigarette. It doesn't happen very often. But everyone else has thought it was a death stick because that's the closest thing they have here. Although I think those are way more addictive and closer to like, hey, let's do a much harder drug in a stick form. Yeah. So this would be interesting. Also, Fan said the Emperor is, well, a bit beyond a Bacta treatment. I don't know. Like, I legitimately don't know. Bacta's kind of a miracle, oh, fuck, it works drug. So it's more, does the plot require it not to work? Yeah, joking aside, the plot requires the Emperor not to have it work. And also because he's dying for reasons that may or may not be important. And also it's been revealed lately that the entire soul sacrifice thing is utterly not important. So may or may not be driving him increasingly insane. Yeah, now Fan I don't think is going to approach it that way, but it would be interesting if he was. I don't know. I doubt it, mostly because it wouldn't have any bearing on this story, but that's one of the things they have started dropping out there.
Hand and stowed them away in an inner pocket on his coat. He then folded and rolled the empty carton before handing it to Combeer.
Here, bite down on this. Should make it easier for you and keep you from nipping off the end of your own tongue.
That would be bad.
The big man said.
I mean, admittedly, if he was being nice, he would let him do that right now because it would probably be less terrifying than anything he's about to go through, but he doesn't know that yet.
And despite her misgivings, Javona was grateful for that too. Not only because it would make things easier for her rescuer, but because it would make things easier for her as well, not having to hear his pained whinging. Thanks, Sam, said Combeer, quickly taking the rolled carton and placing it between his teeth, biting down. Once he did, Javona continued her delicate work, almost losing focus as the entire passageway around them began to shake and tremble. Loud blasts that made her ears ring, reverberating through the entire structure. Samael took either side of his wide black trench coat, covering them with his bulk as dust and detritus fell from the ceiling, keeping it out of Combeer's wounds. What is that?
That would
Javona
be a
cried
spaceship.
Out. If I had to guess, I'd say it's the Republic.
The big man answered.
Looks like they finally decided to pull out the big guns,
he added. Javona pulled the fragments out of Combeer with more haste than she had intended.
He'll get better.
Making him groan into the carton and sag when it exited his flesh, almost tearing its way out of him. Wincing herself, Javona paused to look around. They are going to bring the wall down on top of us.
And everyone
she
else.
Almost screamed as panic flooded her, but Samael shook his head.
And unfortunately, he's probably right. They won't do that. I'm sure Samael has a way to get out right now, and Javona, admittedly, probably could do some random psychery bullshit to get out. But Combeer would be dead, and frankly, at this point, that sounds like it's becoming the more nice option for him.
Nah, they won't target their weapons directly over us. I've already seen 3 Jedi and a mess of clones run through.
Yeah, Palpatine would never do that. Admittedly, the people in charge right now are not Order 66th, but maybe that'll come up later somehow.
Here, they know we're using this passageway. They're probably blowing the gate down and scouring the tops of the walls. Just hold tight. It will.
Actually, now that he mentions it, how they were taking such direct pinpoint accuracy, it does need to be pointed out, that is writing the... Sorry, I was going to say Imperial. The Star Wars Republic segment with incredible pinpoint accuracy in their weapon usage from high distances. It's not impossible considering they have near stationary locations, but it's still really cool to see that level of precision.
Pass, the man said, the surety in his voice giving Javona the confidence she needed to continue her work. Samael turned out to be correct, the shaking and quaking passing after nearly 40 seconds, the high-pitched thrums and blasts of ship-scale turbolasers moving off and away into the distance.
That's what the shoulder
But
pads.
not too far a distance. With the disturbance now gone past, Javona found herself able to redouble her efforts. And as the large rebel stood up from them, she finished her work, extracting the last bit of metal from the axamite. There, done, she said, grabbing pads and gauze and beginning to seal and patch the wounds. Combeer spat out the carton, sighing heavily and breathing hard. Thank the fragging force, he said, wiping sweat from his brow and pushing the rebreather back onto his mouth, taking several deep gasps.
Don't thank it just yet,
said a familiar voice. The voice of her brother.
Yeah, the Primus,
Bathrazan.
because he got
Snapping
burned.
her head up right away, Javona gasped in shock as she saw her beloved sibling stagger through the entryway. Body sagging, back and shoulders smoking and blackened. She began to
Yeah,
rise
old
right
lady
away,
did a number on him.
but a thick hand on her shoulder held her in place, prompting her to glare up at Samael.
You can't do nothing for birds.
What?
But I can.
Because he's buying his entryway into their trust by helping them. Yeah, that makes sense.
Said the man, holding up a second Bacta rebreather.
Well, I mentioned earlier Bacta on a gene stealer. Granted, this one's already pretty mutated, so it might not matter much.
Finish what you're doing with Combeer here. I'll take care of your... what is he? Your brother?
He said, Javona nodding to his question and continuing to wrap Combeer's wounds. Samael stood up straight, walking on the balls of his feet as he approached the alien man, holding out the Bacta device as he did. Bathrazan staggered forward, grimacing in pain, one lightsaber clutched in one of his two more human-like hands, the other clearly having several broken fingers, though the entirely alien claw opposite those arms was still fully intact. Bathrazan used his free, clawed hand to delicately grasp the device once Samael and he neared each other. But Samael did not release the rebreather.
Oh?
The Primus
Is he
tugging
finally
on
pulling
and
something off?
almost tearing it, looking up with a confused, quizzical expression. Again, Javona felt it.
So we're seeing Samael finally take action. Okay.
Something was wrong about this man.
Wait for
But
it.
she did not feel it strongly enough, not until she heard what Samael whispered to her brother. A whisper which still made it to her ears
For the Emperor?
and froze her alien blood.
Not even here, on this frozen silver rock, will you escape his eyes.
The large man growled, his face creasing with
Nice.
lines which transformed his expression
He got in
from
close
a
enough.
passive one to a passionately vicious facade.
Nor
he's burning
his
it
judgment.
Bathrazan's eyes widened, his claws opening, single remaining lightsaber activated.
But
Javona opened her mouth,
already in close.
beginning to scream a warning, power flowing
gonna
through
deal
her
with Javona,
eyes,
though.
attempting to throw her brother back. But none of it was even remotely fast enough to stop Samael. The ruby ring on his right hand, the same hand he had been using to hold out the rebreather,
Digital weapon?
shone like the sun, flaring bright red as it instantaneously expelled a stream of energy. The lethal torrent of a las cannon bursting forth from the
Assuming
unassuming
digital
digital weapon.
see, this is what I wish 40K would describe more often when it comes to digital weapons. Usually a digital weapon on the tabletop is, and you get like 1 extra damage for a weaker usage. It's like, okay, that's cool. But here it's like, dude, this is actually really cool.
The ring blew apart in the process, but Bathrazan was
Atomized the
atomized
Gene
in the
Stealer.
same instant. His limbs and head falling away
Maybe this
as
isn't the best
his
time to reveal
entire
himself, though?
torso was torn apart at the molecular level.
No, because his target were the leaders of the Gene Stealer Rebellion. Still weird that he hasn't killed Javona, because out of all of them, she's probably the biggest. Would he know she's the biggest threat? I want to say yes, because Inquisitor, but it's always possible maybe they're just missing info.
And the man called Samael was not even
Yep.
done yet. Javona was halfway through her scream when she noticed what he had been doing with his other hand.
Oh?
Smoothly reaching into the confines of his black coat and withdrawing a long snouted stubber. The hand cannon aimed
Yeah, but
directly
she's
at
a
her face,
psyker.
even as the assassin who had taken the life of her brother continued to look forward. There was a flash, and he fired, Javona launching her mind to stop the
But-
bullet, to slow it down and catch it before it could reach her. But they were too close to each other. The attack too sudden, the loss too great for the needed focus. Binding waves of psychic power snapped and tore, the bullet rending through them on its way to her head.
Someone gonna get in the
But
way?
something did save her. Or rather, someone. Acting even before the bullet had been shot, moving on some precognitive intuition.
I wonder what that intuition is.
Combeer proved himself to her again, but this time in the ultimate way. The young warrior wrapped his arms around Javona and tried to pull her back, attempting to roll out of the way with her. and
It's
taking
probably
the
better for
shot
Combier if he
meant for her
dies here.
in the process.
Everything else
The
would be worse.
bullet ripped open half his skull, and Javona watched as the light flickered in his eyes, still wide, still shocked, having moved before he had even understood what exactly was happening. No! Javona wailed as they fell over each other, recovering quickly, surrounding his head and face in her power, attempting to hold him.
Yeah, I'm going to stick to what I said. This is actually a nicer end for Combier than what would have happened if he stuck with the Gene Stealers. And I was kind of wondering if this was going to be his fate, because Fan has heavily shown that his family does not have plot armor. Usually in a lot of anything Star Wars related, and Fan is sticking to this, family has plot armor up until the message is specifically that they need to die. His dad died unceremoniously. His mom died off screen, and you only got to see his revulsion at what happened to her. Fan is very much using Combier and his family as this is what it happened to the normal people on Axum. And normal is adjacent here, but it's close enough. Having him die here is probably the best possible option because he's lost everything else. And sticking around where he could live would involve becoming a Gene Stealer or Gene Stealer proxy who's basically biologically mind-whammied.
His scorched and damaged brains in his skull to prevent the bleeding that was already gushing from the new
Hopefully he doesn't
mortal
survive this.
injury.
It's not impossible, but...
Combier, don't die. I can fix this.
Does he
I
kill
can.
Javona or does she stick around and become a bigger monster?
Trailing off, her power pulsing, skull fragments flying from the ground and back onto his face. But no mending followed, and Combier's consciousness had already been snuffed like
him.
a candle in the wind. In desperation,
Okay, really, Fan? Wow, you picked this thing. I haven't seen this image before, but you get exactly what it is. How they basically worship the Tyranids without realizing they worship the Tyranids. Which is also why sometimes in actual canon, the Gene Stealers realize what's going to happen to them and then realize that they were being played as much as anyone else if they're still human enough to make that realization.
she held him together, praying to her gods for the power to fix him. But there was no such power. Not from the gods she served.
What?
And her prayers were answered by something else.
What? Fan, what are you doing?
Throne, damn it, kid.
Samael spat from behind her. She turned, eyes still glowing, the man standing 10 feet from her kneeling form, his gun reoriented at her head.
Okay, good. It's not some
Shame
random
you
other
had to
thing.
waste yourself on a lost cause.
He said, shaking his head.
No, this is
before
probably safer for him.
firing again. Javona winced, unable to stop the bullet without surrendering her hopeless bid to save Combier.
But what
To
answered?
preserve some part of her
We're
family.
going like freaking Gene
She
Stealer demons.
closed her eyes, tears welling, but knew it would be over before they could slide from her violet eyes.
But
Again, the bullet was intercepted, something she discovered when she opened her eyes once more, a dark-skinned fist placed before her, lifting away slowly and making her aware of two newcomers. Two Jedi Masters. Mace Windu raised his free hand.
and the Force interceding to protect the Gene Stealer. Ugh. And of course it's Mace Windu doing something that admittedly would be more dangerous than anything Palpatine could pull off. Oh, let me rephrase that. More dangerous than anything Palpatine normally would bother trying to pull off. He could probably pull some absolutely horrible, dumb shit that would make the Gene Stealers look pleasant by comparison. He just doesn't usually care enough because it's not fun enough.
Purple lightsaber clutched in his right,
God damn it, Windu.
releasing the smoking bullet from his
Because he already suspected Samael after he assassinated the other one in the group. So he's probably following him. So even his involvement here isn't a Deus Ex Machina.
force-wreathed palm and letting it drop to the ground.
Well done to
Beside
establish
him,
that.
Obi-Wan Kenobi swung his blade up over his head, extending his free hand towards the secret Imperial, two fingers pointing forward as he crouched.
Admittedly, the biggest problem here is that and I can't believe I'm saying this, the Inquisitor was being too nice and didn't immediately off Javona, even if he didn't want to do it in front of Combeer, who he seemed to have some kind of, you know, not even feeling for, but like just, yeah, no, he was being nice to Combeer, hoping the kid didn't get fucked up, tried to kill everyone but Combeer, felt bad about it after it happened. Yeah, the Inquisitor was being too nice. These are words I never thought I would say, and Fan made them feel normal. This is weird.
Samael, said the first Jedi Master, Mace's dark features twisting into a fixed glare. Samael's face soured, and he raised his gun, clutched in his left hand.
General Windu,
he said in return, taking a step to angle his body as he faced the two interlopers. We were interrupted the last time we spoke. Let's finish that conversation now, said the purple blade-wielding master. Samael gave a shallow nod, extending his free hand out.
How much of a
no
fighter
longer
is Samael?
holding the rebreather and prompting a new weapon to fly out from his cloak and land firmly.
So Psyker adjacent.
It was like a lightsaber hilt,
but
covered in skull ornamentation and imperial sigils.
Did he actually take the time to make an Imperial skull lightsaber? Oh, dear. I don't even... And Fan said, Samael wanted to wait and to spring his trap. He wanted to get Nevins and at least one big bug. Yeah. The thing is, though, you've highlighted how Javona was more important than the bugs. And I would have assumed that he would have known Javona was a much bigger target than the bugs ever were. I guess this is maybe lacking information on his side. Otherwise, Javona would have been a much bigger target. It's not really something that matters too much right now because she doesn't seem like the bigger target, but whatever. And Fan said this is a Solex energy blade. Ah, because he has digital weapons, he would have energy blades as well. No idea what a Solex is, but I can assume at this point, most franchises rip off Star Wars as it is. And 40K is very guilty of that, especially early on.
A bright, white blade bursting from its base and extending out, creating a crackling, unstable blade of pale energy. Let's, growled the traitorous rebel.
Is he a traitor since he never actually turned sides?
The other Jedi Master, looking to his side and at Javona. She looked up at him with wide eyes.
Oh.
But Combeer
is not
She stuttered
anymore.
frantically. Neither of you stand a chance if you stay.
You know, I was assuming he was just dead because head blown off. But Obi-Wan even saying that, is Fan actually planning to keep Combeer alive somehow? What the fuck?
Take him if you can, and run, and don't stop until you are safely out of
Or
here,
is he just getting them out of the way?
The blonde-haired Jedi Master, sliding from his current stance and into a new one, centering his blade and bringing both hands together upon it. We will guard your back. Now run! He almost yelled, and the act drove Javona into movement, grunting as she lifted Combeer's heavy body, using no small aid from her telekinetic powers, and began to dash away. From behind her, she could hear the crash and crackle of lightsabers meeting in combat, as well as the familiar gunfire from the weapon which had nearly stolen her life. She felt those tears which had been welling sting her eyes, and pushed forward ever more powerfully. Get him! She said angrily to herself, shaking with rage and effort. Jedi, I hope the Force really is with you. For Bathrazan, for Combeer, beat him! Beat them all!
As much as I'm saying that Combeer dying is the best part right now, and I definitely do not like the Gene Stealers, Fan is doing a really good job at massively humanizing them through Javona. She does, if we didn't know explicitly what the Gene Stealers were and that they are not themselves in many ways or allowed to be anything but monsters who are working for the purposes that they don't even themselves understand outside of the grandfather or whatever the, not Primus, the progenitor level one is, they kind of can come off as really interesting rebels. And I've heard some fiction that has done this in canon 40K. So it's not even that Fans doing something that can't be done. It's just that most 40K does not do this at all. So seeing this done here is really well done, because she comes off as sympathetic, helpful, looking for aid, helping people, being generally good. I mean, her brothers and the other ones who knew a little bit more about, we're going to fuck you up. They're assholes of the highest order, and they're the monsters you think, but Joanna just isn't that far into it right now, and it kind of works. Because it's that person you think is a good character, despite knowing that they are literally a time bomb.
She yelled over her shoulder as she escaped the battle, the only one of her kind who would.
The only one. If they're lucky, that's the case. Unfortunately, I can't go any further today because
Whispered to
why does it always default to that point? I do need to go and take my wife out because it's her birthday, and I may or may not have said I wouldn't stream that long yesterday before going for 9 hours. So between this and that, I need to cut the stream here. That said, god damn, fan, you did an amazing job, and I wish I could have gone longer today. Whatever happens next week, unless something does happen, which is entirely possible, I want to finish this. I want to see just what happens. I want to see what's going on right now, man. And he just said at the end, the gene stealers are horrifically insidious. Not because they alien, but because they are human. Yes, and it makes them more interesting. Although, admittedly, I kind of wish they would have alien gene stealers as well. Eldar infected, Dark Eldar infected probably has happened. Although with all of their drugs in the system, I wouldn't be surprised if they treated it like an interesting little toy and didn't notice. But, you know, infected other versions in Ogren, for example, I would love to see more variation beyond just what a gene stealer infecting a human would be like. That's just me in 40k, though. Here, though, I love this. I love seeing this finally happen. I love that we're getting to see Combier's entire arc reach up where the Force is something that Genova has a lot of interest in. And frankly, that's one of the few things I think might be able to change what's going on. Because if this was 40k, I think it's hopeless. Maybe something happens with her that the Force decides to help her in some way, because it can do that. Or it'll help her in some way because it can also do that. I don't know. I have no idea what idea Fan has cooking, and I'm hoping I didn't give him any because that would be absolutely terrifying. And I know for a fact he's very good at making horrific things in writing, and I'd rather not do that again because it was nauseating, and no. Yeah. Basically, I'm going to head out. It's my wife's birthday. Well, technically a day early, but I'm busy tomorrow. Work. And we're going to go celebrate. I have no idea what we're doing, but it's whatever she wants, and I'm looking forward to that because I love my wife and she's awesome. And she also may or may not have forgiven me for the 9-hour live stream that was only 7 hours longer than I thought it would be yesterday for the 3rd week in a row. I really need to get that in order. Yeah. Basically what I'm saying is if you haven't already, there's a link below to the original video. If you've hit it up, great. If you haven't, fix that. And for the people who have, do it again because this is great and Fan needs more watch time. Do I know how much he has? No. He needs more though. That's just a fact. Fix that. I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.